And we've gotten used to shelters in America, and shelters are no place for children. Our threshold of tolerance seems to constantly begin to get lower and lower and lower. And when I think about our chief preoccupation at the Children's Defense Fund now, which is the cradle to prison pipeline, and I looked at those babies and I looked at those adolescent boys who are sitting there in this homeless shelter without very much, no programming. And, you know, in watching families with children 3 to 18, 6, 7, one family in one room, and wondering what in the world can we do to keep these children from being sucked into the prison pipeline. How do you give them hope? How do you give them a sense that they are valued in society? How do you not give them nightmares from this cavernous hospital with nothing to do and no place to go and very little that's joyful or hopeful? We are very much concerned about what we call the cradle to prison pipeline, because despite the wonderful transformation at the top and a new president whom we all are just grateful for, we have another trend that's been going on, and it is a downward mobility of our children. And the American dream and the American promise has always been about making sure that you have a better life for your children, and that you leave the earth and you leave your nation better than you found it. And we're violating that. About a third of black children are not going to do as well as their parents did, and that's true with the economic greed that has not invested adequately in the seed corn of the future. Many of our children are not going to be able to have the same quality of life and standards of living that we had, and that's not acceptable. One of my last cases in Mississippi was for a family that were extraordinary, that lived in one of the worst counties in Mississippi, Sunflower County, that was presided over by Senator Eastland, a very famous segregationist. They were sharecroppers. This was Miss Fannie Lou Hamer's county as well. But they wanted their children, they had 9 children, Mr. and Mrs. Maybertha and Matthew Carter wanted their 9 children, of their 9 children, they wanted their 7 younger children to have a better life than they had. And they wanted to go and challenge Mississippi's fraudulent freedom of choice school desegregation plans, and I had the privilege of being their lawyer. And we won. We knocked out the sham freedom of choice in Mississippi, and she enrolled her 7 youngest children in the public schools of Drew, Sunflower County, Mississippi. And they went through hell. They were firebombed, and they were pushed off their plantation. They didn't have food because the state began to move from free commodities over into food stamps that charged 50 cents per person, and there were many people in Mississippi who had no income and couldn't afford that. The children were each in a separate classroom in the Drew, Mississippi schools, and they were harassed daily and segregated, sitting in the only row in their room. But they stuck it out because Miss Carter was determined that her children were going to be educated and be able to contribute to American society. And they all finished high school and they all finished college. They went to Ole Miss, they went to Mississippi State. And about 6 years ago, I got a call from a friend down in Mississippi telling me that Miss Maybertha's grandson, Lorenzo, was in Parchment Prison. And I wondered what had happened in one generation. As we looked at the children in Drew, Mississippi, the boys were all being sent to prison, were dropping out of school, were engaged in the drug trafficking. And what has happened here? The cradle to prison pipeline, in my view, is the worst crisis faced by the black community since slavery. It is an unfolding national catastrophe. 1 in 3 black boys born in 2001, 7 years old today, is going to go to prison in his lifetime. 1 in 6 Latino boys is going to go to prison unless we do something. 1 in 17 black girls and white boys is going to go to prison. Incarceration, and you've heard that we lead the world, is the new American apartheid. And on my really depressed days, I call it our new American slavery. And if we don't see it and break it up, it's going to undermine the last 50 years of sacrifice and struggle that resulted in what you've seen happen in our nation and in the White House. It is something we've all got to see. We've got to stand up and say, you got to stop it, and we've got to replace that cradle to prison with a cradle to college and to productive work. We've got to deal with the child poverty and family poverty and racial disparities that drive it. The most dangerous place for a child to try to grow up in America today is at that intersection of race and poverty, despite the enormous progress that we have made. And while we should applaud what's happening at the top, we must be very mindful that if you keep getting a bigger and bigger bottom, that you're going to pull the whole structure down. And so we have created a framework and begun a crusade for as long as it takes to break up this new threat to American unity and to American community, and to try to reweave the fabric of family and reweave the fabric of community, to begin to get adults of all race and income groups providing the kind of voice for children. We need a new social justice movement. We need a new movement to put the social and economic underpinnings and to finish what Dr. King and others began, because hope has to have meat on its bones, and that's really health and mental health care. So we're systematically trying to look at all the key entry points into the cradle to prison pipeline. A lot of that is the breakdown of family, because a lot of the socialization institutions have fallen down. Family, neighborhoods are not what they used to be. We used to be community property in the dinosaur days when I was growing up. And the whole community thought they were responsible for all of its children, and our teachers were our Sunday school teachers and were our public school teachers, and everybody felt free to correct and to make sure that everybody knew what was happening with its children. And that sense of community ownership for children has broken down. Our churches and our faith institutions, again, very important pillars in the community, in my view, have gone AWOL. They are not competing with the drug dealers and the gangs who are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The church doors and the synagogue doors and the mosque doors are too often closed. And so many children whose families have broken down and whose schools are not educating them and who are out on the streets have no safe havens and no safe adults and no good mentors to provide alternatives to the street cultures and to the television culture. And we must wake it up. And then when we look at our fiscal incentives and the fact that our states are spending on average 3 times more per prisoner than per public school pupil, a dumber investment policy I could not think of, then we know we've got a big set of problems. And so it is a new challenge if we're going to maintain our progress and go forward. Obviously, the Convention on the Rights of the Child would have a fair amount to say about the continuing racial and income disparities that results in so many children being tracked from before birth into prison and into dead-end lives. But it is something that I hope we can all address. And again, I think in the context of the debate on the Convention on the Right of the Child and the ratification, that we should give voice to. And we can and we must, but so, you know, it's a very complex period, but again, I think that our coming together in new ways, getting out of our comfort zones, exiting our silos, children don't come in pieces, and while we need to make sure that every child gets born with prenatal care, please help us get that this year. I mean, all these low birth weight babies and babies coming into the world with 3 and 4 strikes against them without prenatal care, maybe a drug or substance abusing parent, mother, no father in the home, no steady, stable, safe neighborhood, no income stream that could begin to give them the kind of enriching lives. If we can get prenatal care and if we can get health coverage and mental health coverage, there are thousands of children sitting up in American juvenile detention facilities solely because their parents could not find mental health coverage in their communities. You shouldn't have to go to jail to get mental health care in America. And that's one of the things we need to insist on. In a health insurance plan, the President's proposal does say that we're going to provide home visiting and nurse-parent partnerships and early Head Start and quality Head Start and preschool and child care. And if we can get together thoughtfully and innovatively, all of you child care, early childhood experts, and really design a new system to catch them, if we can get them here born healthily and at normal birth weights to the degree possible, then if we can catch them at birth and provide the parents the supports they need, because they can't teach what they don't know. There's a Hart and Risley study that came out of Kansas City that said that children of welfare parents, when compared to children of more affluent, college-educated parents, had a word interaction gap of 30 million words by age 3, which is why early Head Start and quality child care is so important. And we've got the building blocks, if we build a movement here, to put that in place thanks to the President's stimulus package and in the new budget. And we've been able to try to see how you can keep children out of the child welfare system to make sure that children can be placed with parents and grandparents. We've got so many blessed grandparents raising grandchildren today, but often without the support system. So can we keep them out of the child welfare system? Because once they get into these systems, it kind of goes. But we've got some new tools to enforce that with our new Family Connections bill from last year, an Adoption Assistance Act. And again, if each of the churches were trained in how to use these new laws like adoption system, in fact, 10% of the churches. So they were going to really try to make sure that they work with grandparents and aunts and other extended families to make sure that children stay in a family network and don't go into a foster care system where they're often banded from one place to the other. We could perhaps close down the child welfare system if the community and if adults of responsibility exercise that responsibility. And then if we can now get in place a universal preschool system, if we've got those first 3 years taken care of, Dr. Wagner, we can try to see how we take care of the 4s and 5s and 6s and get them all ready for school, because many are already behind. And then if we could get all schools ready to serve all children with high expectations, we could begin to move forward. And we've got a Secretary of Education and a President